Daf Yomi, Tractate Sanhedrin, Ayin Ches, Amid Beis. Sanhedrin 78b, top of the page. We had just started the Gemara from the previous Amud, Tana Rabbanan, as Zo Darash Rabbi Nechemia, Im Yakum Isalech Bachutz. The sages taught, Rabbi Nechemia interpreted this verse in arriving at his ruling. It is written, if he rises and walks outside. And now we're on top of 78b. Al Mishan Tov and Yikam Akem. Chi taladat ze mahalech b'shuk v'ze neherag. Ela ze she'amaduhu lemisa. V'akel mima shehaya ulachar kach hichbid v'meis shehu pater. If he rises and walks outside upon his staff, then that struck him is absolved. Only for his loss of livelihood shall he give, and he shall heal him. Exodus 21:19. The phrase that he struck him is absolved is superfluous. Would it enter your mind to say that this individual whom he struck is walking in the marketplace, and that individual who struck him will be executed as a murderer? Rather, this is referring to a case where the doctors assessed his condition, saying that it would lead to his death, and his condition eased somewhat from what it was, and he walked in the marketplace, and thereafter his condition worsened, and then he died. And the verse is teaching that he is exempt. The Gemara asks, and as for the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Nechemia, who hold that he is liable in that case, what do they interpret from that verse that he that struck him is absolved? The Gemara explains that according to the rabbis, the verse teaches that they incarcerate him until the fate of the victim has been determined. And the phrase that he that struck him is absolved means that he is freed from incarceration. Rabbi Nechemia, the Gemara asks, and asks Rabbi Nechemia, from where does he derive the halacha of incarceration? The Gemara answers, he derives it from the incident of the wood gatherer in the wilderness, with regard to whom it is written, and they placed him under guard. Numbers 15:34. The Gemara challenges, and the rabbis too let them derive the halacha of incarceration from the incident of the wood gatherer. The Gemara explains, with regard to the wood gatherer, he was incarcerated because it was known from the outset that he was liable to be killed, and Moses did not know with what form of capital punishment his death would be implemented. This is to the exclusion of this individual who struck another, with regard to whom we do not know if he is liable to be killed or if he is not liable to be killed. Therefore, one cannot derive the halacha in this case from the case of the wood gatherer. The Gemara asks, and Rabbi Nechemia, from where does he derive the halacha? He too should not be able to derive the halacha from the case of the wood gatherer. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Nechemia derives the halacha with regard to one who strikes another from the incident of the blasphemer. See Leviticus 24:12, where Moses did not know if he was liable to be killed, and he nevertheless imprisoned the blasphemer. The Gemara asks, and the rabbis, why don't they derive the halacha from the incident of the blasphemer? The Gemara answers, the rabbis hold that the case of the blasphemer was a provisional edict. It was only for that time. Kedetanya, Yodea Moshe Rabbeinu shemikoishes b'misa, shenemar mechalel Moshe yumas. Ela lo hayad be'ezo misa neherag, shenemar ki lo porash v'gomer, ve'aval megadev, lo nemar bo ela lifrosh lahem al pi Hashem. Shelo haya Moshe yodea im hu ben misa kol ikar im lav. The difference between the uncertainty in the case of the wood gatherer and the uncertainty in the case of the blasphemer is, as it is taught in the Braita. Moses, our teacher, knew that the wood gatherer was liable to be sentenced to death, as it is stated, and you shall observe the Shabbat as it is sacred to you. One who desecrates it shall be put to death. Exodus 31:14. But he did not know with which death penalty he was to be killed, as it is stated, and they placed him under guard, as it had not been declared what should be done to him. Numbers 15:34. But concerning the blasphemer, it is stated only, and they placed him under guard that it might be declared to them according to the Lord. Leviticus 24:12, as Moses did not know if the blasphemer was liable to be killed at all or not. Chad umadu lemisa v'chaya, v'chad umadu lemisa v'hakel mima shehaya, ela l'rabanan trei umdani le'amali. The Gemara asks, granted, according to Rabbi Nehemiah, that is the reason that the two assessments are written. It is written in one verse, and if men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he did not die but is bedridden, Exodus 21:18, indicating that after the initial blow, the victim is assessed to determine whether or not he is expected to die. In the following verse it is written, if he rises and walks outside upon his staff, then he that struck him is absolved, Exodus 21:19, indicating that there is an additional assessment to determine whether or not he fully recovers. One verse is where they assessed his condition, saying that it would lead to death, and he recovered fully. And one verse is where they assessed his condition, saying that it would lead to death and his condition eased from what it was, and he died thereafter. But according to the rabbis, why do I need two assessments? Chad amduhu labisa bechaya, v'chad amduhu lechayim v'mes. The Gemara answers, according to the rabbis, one assessment is where they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to death, and he recovered fully, in which case the assailant is certainly not executed, but pays compensation. And one assessment is where they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to life and he died, in which case the assailant is not executed but pays compensation. Rabbi Nehemiah, amduhu l'chaim v'meis lo tzarich kra sheharei yatsa mi beis din zakai. The Gemara asks Rabbi Nehemiah, from where does it derive these two halachos? The Gemara answers, he holds that in the case where they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to life and he died, one does not need to explicit verse to exempt the assailant from execution, as he emerged from the court after his first hearing innocent, when he predicted that the victim would live. The court does not rescind his initial ruling and convict him. Tana Rabbanan, Hamakes chaveroi v'amduhu lemisa v'chaya poitin oisoi. Amaduhu lemisa v'hakil mima shehaya, omdinoisoi omer sheni lemamoin. V'im le'achar kein hichbid v'meis halach achar oimin ha'imsoi divrei Rabbi Nehemiah v'chachamim oimrim ein oimid achar oimid. The sages taught the case of one who strikes another, and they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to death. He recovered fully. The court exempts the assailant. If they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to death, and his condition eased from what it was, they assess the victim with a second assessment to determine the monetary restitution for damages. And if thereafter his medical condition worsened and he died, the halacha is follow the assessment that was assessed at the intermediate stage, which determined that the victim would live, and the assailant is not executed. This is the statement of Rabbi Nehemiah. And the rabbis say there's no assessment after assessment. The death of the victim proves that the assessment of the intermediate stage was erroneous, and the assailant is executed. Tanya idoch. Amdu lemisa, omdinoi soy l'chaim. L'chaim ein omdinoi soy lemisa. Amdu lemisa, v'hakim v'enu sheya, omdinoi soy omid sheni lemamon. V'im l'achar kein, yichbid v'meis, mishalim nezik, b'sar liorshim. It is taught in another brisa, if they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to death, and his condition approved, they assess his condition to determine whether it would lead to life. If they assess his condition, saying that it would lead to life, and his condition deteriorated, they do not then assess his condition to determine whether it would lead to death, but the assailant is exempted based on the initial determination. If they assess his condition, saying it would lead to death, and his condition eased from what it was, they assess the victim with a second assessment to determine the monetary restitution for damages. and the assailant is certainly liable to pay restitution for the injury that he caused. And if after his medical condition worsened and he died, the assailant pays restitution, and the heirs for the injury and suffering that he caused. The Gemara asks from when is the initial assessment of the value of the victim performed to determine the sum of the damages the assailant pays. It is the assessment of his value from the moment that the assailant struck him. The Gemara notes, and this unattributed brisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah. As in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, he is liable to be executed, even if there was a temporary improvement in his condition before he died. New Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Niskavin laharages abehema v'harages adam lanachri v'harages Yisrael lenafolim v'harages ben kayama potter." If one intended to kill an animal and he killed a person standing adjacent to it, or if he intended to kill a Gentile for whose murder is not liable to be executed in court, and he killed a Jew, or if he intended to kill non-viable newborns for whose murder one is not liable, and he killed a viable person, the assailant is exempt from execution, since his intent was to kill one for whose murder he is not liable. If one intended to strike another on his loins and the blow was not powerful enough to kill him, if it were to land on his loins but instead the blow landed on his chest over the victim's heart, and it was powerful enough to kill him when it landed on his chest over his heart and the victim died as a result of the blow, the assailant is exempt from execution, as he did not intend to strike the victim a blow that would cause his death. If he intended to strike him on his chest over his heart,